thought it was the,
You'll have to pay for PVC.
What's that?
Yeah, extra PVC.
It's the new stuff. Yeah.
Good morning. Hope everybody is doing good and ready for whatever they say it's supposed to be. Like I think like a 50% chance of snow by like 5 o'clock tonight or something like that. Ain't it?
it was
That's what the
no
weather's
bar
saying.
Sunday.
Anyway, we're as ready as we'll be, I guess. Our lesson this week is lesson number 13, which is the last one in the book. And we're in Isaiah chapter 55. And it says here in the lesson, Isaiah 55 says preachers call it the John 3:16 of the Old Testament, or the Gospel according to Isaiah. And you'll see why more as we study here, if you haven't read this before. But we'll start with chapter 55, verses 1 through 3. And it says, Ho, everyone that thirsteth, come ye to the waters, and he that hath no money, come ye buy and eat. Yea, come buy wine and milk without money and without price. Wherefore do ye spend money for that which is not bread, and your labor for that which satisfieth not? Hearken diligently unto me, and eat ye that which is good, and let your soul delight itself in fatness. Incline your ear to hear, and come unto me. Hear, and your soul shall live, and I will make an everlasting covenant with you, even with the sure mercies of David. So, verse 1 begins with something I have never seen in the Bible or noticed before, is the word H-O, how it starts there. And it's to bring important significance. I was trying to think of another word. It was... Throughout the Bible, a lot of verses starts with, like, you'll see a lot of them starts with therefore, and that means what I've always been told, if the sentence starts with therefore or something thereabouts, you want to read what's before it, and then if it starts with you want to read what's before it and after it. And there's a couple other key words that's like that throughout it that brings your attention. I can't remember what all they was, but they bring your attention to reading what's before and what's after, and the importance of it. But this word H-O here, it's to call attention or very important, and that goes all throughout chapter 55 here. There's all kind of words like that to call your attention to it, to make sure you're really listening. And he done this over and over. Isaiah did all through this chapter here, is trying to make sure everyone is listening and paying attention. But it says also the unusual offer in verse 1 said, talking about all the different items there that it mentions in verse 1, water and food and wine and all those things. And those was kind of considered staples. If you look at the times back then, it's kind of like now they give snow and they sell all the milk and bread and everything like that. That's kind of their staples back then, and I guess in that region, that's kind of the staples. Everybody knows how important water is. You got to have water. You got to have food, and then they talk about milk is another commodity that they had back then. All those things were staples in the wine and things like that. It was just part of their everyday life. But it says if in our market-driven society there in our lesson, it says we often see products we really need and want but just can't afford. It says, what about God's offer? It's for the person who has no money and it's affordable to all. And it says salvation is a commodity marketed without money and without price. Then we'll go into verse 2. It says the unprofitable quest there in your lesson. It says verse 2 describes man's fruitless and frustrating efforts to find satisfaction. This verse suggests that water, wine, and milk of verse 1 symbolize spiritual realities. And thirst is a good analogy for the longing a person feels inside to be whole. All the people have spiritual thirst that only God can fill. And verse 2 points to this. So that's the one thing, all of us have that, you hear people talking about it on the TV and in the news and all kind of things like that. People's always talking about they feel like something's missing. All the time. Nobody can ever put your finger on what's missing. And I think that's what's missing, and 90% of the people that is looking for something, they're missing the relationship with God. It says, wherefore do you spend money for that which is not bread? It said the things people can buy with their money won't meet their basic spiritual needs. They can't buy their salvation. Is what the translation of that is. You can buy everything. People have enough money to buy everything that you can think of and still not be satisfied with the things they buy. And when people try to work for their salvation they bring themselves only frustration, dissatisfaction, and uncertainty is the big word there. If you're trying to work for it, you're trying to do enough good deeds, you're trying to do this, that, and whatever to try to earn your salvation, is try to do enough good or whatever it is. You're never sure, and you never feel like you completed anything. There is, believe it or not, religions that push works for salvation, and that would be a hard one to get behind there, because it's really hard to it would be really hard to do anything and feel like you accomplished that in your head. That's really hard. If you go back to the law had a lot of sacrifices and things that they had to do, and all those things was very, I'm sure that was very labor intensive and a lot of work involved in that to gather all the sacrifices and the animals and bring them to the temple, and all the different things they had to do during with the sacrifices. That was probably a lot of work, and a lot of planning had to go into all that as well. And as far as the sacrifices, it wasn't just you didn't get just any old animal or any old bird or whatever it was you were sacrificing. You always had to take the best. And then we go to on to where it said in the part D, it says the uncomplicated requirement. It said the word come comes from, it appears, and this is another one I was talking about, the word come appears 4 times in verses 1 through 3, and it's trying to show you the importance of it here. And it says hearken diligently and hear carefully and hear, and your soul shall live. All these different things is just trying to make sure that everyone is paying attention to listen to what he's saying here, listen to what these verses really mean. But the things we can buy or earn are worthless when compared to what God offers. buy, you can sell, you can come up with anything that you want to, and it's still going to be basically worthless. You can't buy your salvation, and you can't do enough good deeds to earn your salvation. Nor can your parents or your relatives or anybody like that can't do enough to earn your salvation, and they can't do it for you. It has to be done yourself. And we'll go on now to verses 3b. It says here through 5, and I'll just read 3 through 5. It says, "Incline your ear and come unto me. Herein your soul shall live, and I will make an everlasting covenant with you, even the sure mercies of David. Behold, I have given him for a witness to the people, a leader and a commander to the people. Behold, thou shalt call a nation that thou knowest not, and nations that knew thee shall run into thee, because of the Lord thy God, and for the Holy One of Israel, for he hath glorified thee." So the covenant here is talking about, Isaiah referred to the Davidic covenant. Do anybody know what that is?
That's the lineage of the kingdom being established through David and
Through
his
David.
ancestors.
So for the people of this time, they understood the Davidic covenant. People of Isaiah's time understood the Davidic covenant, and then they were looking to that, as well as looking is what this is going to get more into is for the Gentile nations. As we get into verse 5 here, it says. Isaiah referred to the Davidic covenant. "I will make an everlasting covenant with you, even the sure mercies of David." This covenant rests on God's earlier promise of one of David's seeds would occupy the throne forever. And as it said, and this covenant is the guarantee that God will keep his word and give life to the recipient of his gracious offer. So this is still a promise. We know God's promises are all true, and this is still a promise that was made all the way back at Abraham, be the father of many nations. This is the same promises. It's all the way back to then. It says, the witness, leader, and commander described in verse 4 ultimately refers to Jesus Christ. Although David was a witness for God, the leader and the commander of his people, he foreshadowed the greater Son, the Messiah, who would fulfill the covenant made with David. And said in verse 5 it says, "Behold, thou shalt call a nation that thou knowest not, and nations that knew thee not shall run to thee, because of the Lord thy God, and for the Holy One of Israel, for he hath glorified thee." So this is, it says the nations of verse 5 are Gentile nations that the Messiah will invite to obtain the priceless blessings described in verse 1. And also, if you remember the past 2 lessons, we were talking about the millennial kingdom, how Israel will be the spotlight in the center of the millennial kingdom. This could also refer to that as well, how all the nations will look to Israel during the millennial kingdom. Does anyone have anything to add? Or to steer me around? All right, and we'll go to verse 6 and 7 now. It says, "Seek ye the Lord while he may be found, and call upon him while he is near." How many times have we heard that verse? So this whole chapter is full of these verses. It says, "Let the wicked forsake his way, and the unrighteous man his thoughts, and let him return unto the Lord, and he will have mercy upon him, and to our God, for he will abundantly pardon." And as verse 6 says, "Seek ye the Lord while he may be found." The Lord has not always been available, and he will not always be available. One must never presume that he or she will have the opportunity to trust Christ later in life or whatever. I can't remember who the preacher was. I've heard it preached on before, but That's one of the number one lies of Satan is you got plenty of time. Just wait till you get older. One of them things like that. It's one of the things you hear, and it's voice in your head. Something tell you you got plenty of time. Just wait till you get older and calm down, relax, whatever things like that. No, I heard that most of my life is because I grew up going to church every Sunday, and I was 30-year-old before I got saved. So I pushed that voice off in my head. I listened to it for 30 years or whatever. That's just one of them lies, because we're all death is for sure and life is uncertain. Is what it says here in the lesson down there, and that's for sure. And none of us know when our next breath will be or how long it'll be. So that is definitely a come. Where it says there, seek ye the Lord while he may be found. That's what that means. That doesn't mean that he's going anywhere, that he's disappearing. The call will end. It will end eventually, and it'll end for us if we're still around, while we're still on earth. If we pass away without accepting him. So verse 7 describes a person who has accepted the invitation in verse 1. It says, let the wicked forsake his way and the unrighteous man his thoughts, and let him return unto the Lord. The forsaking of sin is not a requirement for salvation. It is rather the expected result of salvation. A change in the believer's life should take place. I'm sorry. Said God expects the believer's new life to be different from his old life. And I'm sure there's a lot of that taught nowadays. Never heard it, but I'm sure there's a lot of that taught and talked about how just say you're saved and then you can go back to doing whatever you did before. I'm sure that sounds like something that our society would come up with, and that's probably something that's been came up with for years. I'm sure I'm not the first person to think of that, and I'm sure there's a lot of people that thinks that. But verse 7 also says at the end of it there, abundantly pardon. So you think abundantly pardon, what does that mean? For the person that you think an abundant pardon would be a person that's in prison for murder and accepts Christ, or someone that's done whatever the worst thing you can think of and is pardoned and comes to Christ. You would think that was an abundant pardon. The other abundant pardon it talks about is the person that's lived a really good life all their life and been a pretty decent person, and then comes to Christ, and you don't realize how abundant the pardon is until you look back on it and you see how much God saved, how much Christ saved you from everything that is all the punishment that could come. The abundant pardon can be looked at in a bunch of different ways, but an abundant pardon it is for sure, because we all have sinned, and if you look at sin as a separation from God, disobeying God, whatever you want to call it, we all have done that, and we all need an abundant pardon. So we go down from verse 8 and 9. It said, for my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, saith the Lord. For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts higher than your thoughts. So it says here in the lesson, it said, this truth is obvious, so why mention it here? It says, because God's work of salvation is something that man could not do, nor could even imagine it. And God declared that his dealings with people are different from what we would have thought. So is that 100% yes? It's a whole lot different than what we would have thought. Would we ever thought to come up with that? Would we have ever? Would we pardon people like he did? Somebody that had wronged us every possible way you could wrong someone, would we still forgive them? Would we be willing to would we be willing to give our son's life for that person that had done as many wrong things as they could do to us? So that's one big a big gap between us and God. God's always perfect, and He sees the perfect ending, and we don't. We are I guess at our hearts we're gonna try to protect ourselves and everyone around us as much as we can. And if somebody does us wrong, it's going to be hard to forgive them and hard to get over it, you know. So I don't think we would be as good at forgiving and reconciling as God is, and His ways are way better, way greater than our ways. And it says here, I like this part on this part right before we start in verse 12 and 13, if you got it in your book. It says, this little chapter here, it says, or a little paragraph says, just as the rain helps the earth produce a harvest, so God's word will produce a result. It shall not return to me void, but it shall accomplish that which I please, and it shall prosper in the thing whereto I send it. What God says is trustworthy and powerful. No one can claim that God is not able to keep His word. And I think I missed reading a verse. Yep, 10:11. Let me read 10:11. That'll make sense what I just said. It says, for as the rain cometh down and the snow from heaven, and returneth not thither, but watereth the earth, and make it bring forth and bud, that it may give seed to the sower and bread to the eater, so shall my word go forth out of my mouth. It shall not return unto me void, but it shall accomplish that which I please, and it shall prosper in the thing whereto I sent it. So nothing of God's word is going to be wasted. Nothing in the Bible, nothing that God mentions that's in the Bible is going to be wasted, is going to not be productive, is not going to come true. Everything mentioned, everything prophesied throughout Isaiah, we've been studying about the millennial kingdom, all of that's going to come through. Everything that God had promised all the way from Adam and Eve has came true and will come true. Word will not return to Him void and non-productive. And verse 12 and 13 says, for you shall go out with joy and be led forth with peace. The mountains and the hills shall break forth before you singing, and all the trees of the field shall clap their hands. Instead of the thorn shall come up the fir tree, and instead of the briar shall come up the myrtle tree. And it shall be to the Lord for a name and an everlasting sign that shall not be cut off. It says this chapter closes with an outburst of rejoicing. The salvation promised in this chapter is certainly cause for rejoice. Peace, of one of the provisions of justification, is often connected to joy. And Isaiah used some figurative language talking about the mountains and hills singing and clapping their hands. And it says, and Paul wrote that nature itself, being under the curse of sin, is groaning and waiting for a deliverance of Christ. And when He comes again, so when did nature go under the curse of sin? When did that happen? When did nature go under the curse of sin? Is what I was thinking. And then you go back to Adam and Eve, and what does He tell Adam? He says, out of the ground, thorns and things like that will grow, and weeds and all that will grow. So that's when the ground went under the curse of sin as well. I never thought about that until I read this. But even the ground longs for deliverance, because it gets into there. It's talking about the thorn and the fir and the tree and all that. What did we study in 2 weeks ago in lesson 11? We was talking about the millennial kingdom, how even the ground and the things around here will change, how all that will change. So even the ground is looking forward to the deliverance when it will actually take hold. We talked about how the deserts and things like that, and you think of that area around Israel and all over there, and we see everything in the pictures from TV, and it looks arid, dry, and just terrible because it just looks like desert. You don't see grass and things like we get to see. And all that's the curse of the land. It's curse of the ground because of sin. And it says, and then in verse 13 there is what says it will be the fir tree and the myrtle tree shall come up, and I think it actually refers to the millennial king. Yeah, in lesson 11 there, we had talked about that. Then we'll go on to chapter 56, and we're just going to cover this first two verses here because it kind of goes along with chapter 55. It says, "Thus saith the Lord, keep ye judgment and do justice, for my salvation is near to come, and my righteousness to be revealed. Blessed is the man that doeth this, and the son of man that layeth hold upon it, that keepeth the Sabbath from polluting it, and keeping his hand from doing any evil." It says the person who lives basically the description, the person who lives a righteous life will be blessed. Anyone have anything to add? This took me a lot longer to study than it is to teach. I guess because I was trying to find a corner to hide in. It's just interesting to me how all of these things, all these different verses in chapter 55 here, they're so recalled and it's so repeated. A lot of these verses seem like they're repeated in different ways, basically saying the same thing, but they're repeated in a lot of different ways. Seems like through the Bible. Do we have the next books?
They're ordered, they have to be in.
Oh, okay.
They're not here, I'll do it.
Okay. Could be. Anyone have any questions? I can go over all these questions in the back of the book, and the teacher's answers, if you want to do a pop quiz on this whole book. We can do that right quick. And I'll look really smart because I have all the answers. I used to think when I was a kid that was such a big deal when you got to see the teacher's book. I remember the first time I seen they had answers, I was like, hey, that ain't right. They shouldn't have answers. Nobody has anything to add? Dismiss it. Heavenly Father, Lord, I thank you for this day. Thank you for your love, your mercy, and your grace. And for all those in attendance today, Lord, I thank you. And please be with those who couldn't be here today, Lord, for whatever the reason, Lord, and heal them in your